Well, Arsenal didn't really need to win in midweek, but they did it anyway. We just convinced now that they're gonna win both competitions.
At the very end of this competition, you meet the best teams in Europe. And it's not an easy thing to do. So I personally don't think Arsenal will do it. I think they will win the Premier League and probably the Carabao Cup.
It's Manchester United this weekend for Arsenal. Is Michael Carrick going to pull another rabbit out of the hat?
I don't think this is where you really test Michael Carrick. I think the bigger tests are ahead. What I'm almost certain of is they will turn up and perform, because they always do in the big game. I think there's an opportunity there for Manchester United to go and do what not many teams have done at the Emirates this season, come away with a positive result.
Everyone is expecting Arsenal to win this, so Mickey's got nothing to lose. I do fancy Arsenal to be too strong here. What they did, the changes they made to go to Inter and win in the way they did, just shows at this moment in time they're the best team in Europe. But we said the same about Liverpool last season.
Would I snap your hands off for a point? Absolutely. I think that would be a tremendous result given how strong Arsenal have been at home.
Watcher, gentlemen, how are you? Very good. Crookie's got his glasses on today. Do you know what that means, Scott? He means business.
Do you know what? He looks half intelligent, doesn't he, with those glasses? I like them.
He no longer looks like sexy Ruben Amorim. He looks like the guy. Who is it? The guy who I'm thinking of. Is it Seth Rogen who does the comedy shows? Looks a little bit like him.
We'll have to Google him now. I don't know him.
Yeah,
You don't know who he is?
No.
God, of course you don't.
I'm Googling it as we speak. He's obviously a good-looking chap, is he?
Absolutely. Yeah.
There he is.
There he is.
Okay, I don't mind that. Yeah, distinguished gentleman. That's okay.
Yeah,
And obviously a funny guy like myself.
Yeah.
All good.
You a funny guy. Exactly. Had a good week, everybody, because Champions League's been quite thrilling. Actually, can you imagine right now what is going on in the halls of UEFA HQ? They are thinking to themselves, this cannot stand. 5 of the top 8 in the Champions League are English Premier League sides, Crook.
Yeah, and at a time when some of those teams are not faring particularly well domestically. I did tweet last night. I had to redo the maths a few times because originally I had all the English teams in there, but obviously Manchester City just outside, though you'd expect them to beat Galatasaray next week. But yeah, 5 out of the 6 English teams in the top 8. Tottenham, 14th in the Premier League. Cruise past the team second in Germany. Liverpool, who are not having a great season, have gone away to France and they've hammered the 3rd best team in Ligue 1. So again, I think it just shows you the power of the Premier League.
Yeah, I mean, look, what we've been saying for a little while, Crook, if you're an English Premier League team, there's not many European teams that should be able to match you. Sometimes they're going to, sometimes they will, but in terms of infrastructure, finance, the amount of pulling power that you've got, the amount of money you've got to spend on recruitment, you've got a lot more than everybody else across Europe because of the amount of money that is spent in the Premier League, the amount of commercial revenue that is in the Premier League. They are some of the most wealthiest clubs in the world. So they should be competing better than everybody else. And I think that sort of muscle is being flexed now. Some really good performances. But Scott was at the only game in which the English team didn't manage to put 3 points on the board in the Arctic Circle with Manchester City. But Scott and I have done Bodo Glimt so much, and I've spent a little bit of time up there talking to them. We knew it was going to be difficult for them, didn't we, Scott?
Yeah. Look, do you know what, Sam? I knew it'd be not easy for Manchester City. Having said that, when you add even more the fact that their season finished end of November and they've only played 2 friendlies, they should have been massively undercooked. I mean, I read somewhere that, they would be fresh. No. You want to be playing more games before you meet a team like Manchester City, unless Manchester City just don't know how to defend. And it was a massive problem. They sort of, after the first minute or so where Bodo Glimt had a couple of good chances, City dominated. And then suddenly it's what we see. It's them on the transition, not able to defend, fullbacks playing like wing-backs. Ryan Aït-Nouri is a right-back. Nico O'Reilly still probably getting used to left-back, although I thought he had a really good game. And then 2 young centre-halves with Rodri in front, who's still a million miles physically from where he was before his injury, because, you can't forget the sending off, but actually on the 3rd goal, he gave the ball away and then the guy went past him as if he wasn't there. So that was a massive, massive problem. And it's a massive problem for City going forward because defensively, they are absolutely, you did that at 6s and 7s.
They really are. And one of the big issues here is this insistence on playing the high line. And actually, we talked about this on Monday's show, Crook, that actually, once you see it's not working, why are you not adapting to it? It hasn't worked in any of the last 3 games. They played Newcastle, and Newcastle got in 3 or 4 times down that right side in behind Nathan Ake. It happened against Manchester United at the weekend, and it happened again on Tuesday night. He's got to adapt, hasn't he, at some point? Just drop off or not insist on playing this highlight. There's not enough pressure on the ball in that midfield to be able to play that highlight.
No, there isn't. And actually, it was interesting listening on talkSPORT. I think it was Jamie Jackson from The Guardian suggesting that actually Rodri returning when clearly not fully fit maybe has caused more issues for City than it's solved. We all thought that once he was back in the team, they would look more resolute, look more watertight. That hasn't been the case. And I'm going to call him out here a bit, Pep, and I know Scott will definitely launch the defence of his god. But it was a few weeks ago now, wasn't it, that Pep Guardiola was comparing himself to Sir Alex Ferguson because he's created this new Manchester City team. Did he go a bit early?
No, he didn't. He didn't do that. Where did he do that? He didn't do that. He spoke to me about it, and he actually said the words, "I'm not Sir Alex Ferguson." That's not comparing himself to Alex Ferguson, is it? Might be a bit of crooky spin there.
I need to dig out the quotes, but he absolutely did in a press conference talk about rebuilding this Manchester City team in the way that Ferguson did. And I think the rebuild is far from complete. We've seen that in recent weeks.
Can I just a little bit of defence of Pep? 4 straight Premier League titles, something Sir Alex wasn't able to do. Sir Alex went 3 years without winning a title. At this moment in time, it's only 1 for Pep. So, I mean, let's just, Sir Alex Ferguson, the greatest Premier League manager for sure. But Pep's right up there as well.
After advice from Darwin Núñez, Nicholas Jackson and Enzo Maresca, Pep has just called and says, could Scott not be the chief executive of my fan club, please? I think he said something about him not having a great track record. I can't remember what it was exactly. Can't quite read the message.
Listen, perhaps missed Darwin Núñez. Chelsea definitely missed Nicholas Jackson.
Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, and Newcastle all win too. I was at Newcastle on Wednesday night, and I thought they were brilliant. I really do. They were so robust in midfield. And you know what? I think it's ridiculous, the amount of sort of people that suggest that Eddie Howe has allowed Newcastle to go stale. I mean, he's had serious injury issues. He had to replace that one of the best strikers that they've had, certainly the best striker they've had since Alan Shearer. And they've managed to get themselves in a position where they're in striking distance of the top 5 in the Premier League. They're in the top 8 of the Champions League and the semi-finals of the Carabao Cup and through to the next round of the FA Cup. Oh, it's really doom and gloom. I know some of the football hasn't been great, and certainly some of those players that were brilliant last year have not hit the same level in terms of form as they did last year. And Anthony Gordon is probably one of those. Tonali, Bruno Guimaraes injured again. They've suffered so much with injury over the course of the early part of the season as well. But I thought they were terrific. They've got a great chance, actually, of going to Paris, nicking a result and getting to the top 4 and top 8. And because they owe Paris one, they owe PSG one next week because of what happened 2 years ago, I think they're going to do it. I think they're going to go to Paris. I think they're going to shock them and they're going to get into the top 8. Come on, Newcastle. Liverpool won, played well. Chelsea won, and Crook didn't play well.
No, crikey. I mean, you talk about the power of the Premier League. That wasn't necessarily in full evidence at Stamford Bridge. Against a Paphos side who, to be fair, in their first season of the competition have been hard to beat. I think that was only their 3rd defeat last night. They don't concede a lot of goals. They don't really look like scoring many either. But they had 71% possession, Chelsea. 17 corners, I think it was. Loads of shots, but a lot of them were from distance that the goalkeeper dealt with comfortably enough. And it wasn't until the 77th minute they finally got the breakthrough goal. So much like Brentford at the weekend, they've won the game, Chelsea. They kept a clean sheet, but definitely it wasn't convincing. And they put too many crosses in for me. It reminded me a little bit. Do you remember when David Moyes was at Manchester United? I think it was against Fulham on a Sunday afternoon at Old Trafford, and they set a record for the number of high deliveries into the box. Chelsea did that. Pedro Neto whipped in some dangerous balls, but Liam Delap didn't look like getting on the end of any of them. I think his form is a real concern. I know he's had injuries and he's been suspended, but at the moment that move doesn't look like working out. And it was a performance from Chelsea that, again, threw up more questions than it did answers.
He's a little bit inconsistent. And Scott and I actually were lucky enough to be at the game at Craven Cottage where with 10 men, Delap led the line. And he was absolutely terrific that day, wasn't he, Scott?
Yeah, he was superb. And you're kind of hoping that would be almost the start of his Chelsea career. And look, I watched the game over a bottle of wine with my old man. And you start thinking this could be a 3 or 4-0. And then it's like that ends a Fernandez goal. If that had been given, then maybe it could have been. Towards the end, I'm like, please, just a scrappy goal, which it ended up what it was. But I mean, if those balls hadn't have gone into the box and it had just been pass, what would Crookie have said then? But he said he's got to get the ball into the box. I'm watching Liam Delap, and I've said this before, it's a £30 million no-brainer to sign Liam Delap, but he's by far a million miles away from the ready-made article. And that's what Chelsea need. I don't think he's been an upgrade on Nicholas Jackson. Yes, he can be very, very good. I'm watching his movement. Fair play to him yesterday. He's got 3 players around him. They played with the back 5 most of the time. And whatever side you're coming up against, this is the Champions League. They know how to defend. They might not know how to score lots of goals and they won't win lots of games, but they can make things very, very difficult. So look, it was job done. It's another a win for Liam and another way that he can move forward. And hopefully Cole
You're
Palmer.
such an apologist, Scott. I was speaking to Chelsea fans queuing for the Tube that they were far from happy with the performance. You can't say you enjoyed that game. It was awful.
No, didn't enjoy it. Didn't enjoy it at all. 90 minutes of my life I'll never get back. But these games are not easy. This is what people need to realise. Unless you get that early goal, it can be very, very difficult. We just talked about Manchester City, and yes, they played away from home, but these Champions League teams, they know how to defend. And they're very well organised. It wasn't good. Liam knows there's a lot to work on, but he hasn't got time. There's another game in a few days.
My brother, little Tom, who Scott got to know very well on Saturday.
Good lad,
night,
by the way. Good lad.
And first class Matt and Bazza all went last night. They had a great time, but I think that's because they'd had not just one bottle of wine, about 7. So they certainly enjoyed themselves, which was good. That's it for the Champions League. Let's get stuck into the Premier League now, starting at the Emirates Stadium. Well, Arsenal didn't really need to win in midweek, but they did anyway, and they've qualified for the Champions League top 8. 7 wins from 7, the only team to do that. A show of power. They are the favourites with the bookies to win it. Is anyone sort of thinking to themselves that maybe somebody else will come up and pip them, or are we just convinced now that they're gonna win both competitions? Crook, it's a hard task. Not many people do that. You don't usually win the Premier League and the Champions League, do you?
No, but it was quite an impressive display. I watched it for talkSPORT in the San Siro to make that many changes, 7 I think it was in total, and still win with ease. I thought Gabriel Jesus was excellent and probably has given Mikel Arteta a bit of an issue when it comes to the United game this weekend, because I know that Gyökeres came on and scored, but Jesus' movement I think could be more of an issue for that Manchester United back line. In terms of the Champions League, on one of our Fiery Friday podcasts with Adrian Durham and Angelina Kelly, I did say we've got to resign ourselves to the fact Arsenal are going to at least win the double. The only nagging doubt in my mind is Liverpool, because I do think, as much as they're not pulling up trees in the Premier League, their style of play is suited to Europe. They prefer it when teams come onto them. Arsenal probably wouldn't do that over 2 legs, but obviously they've not scored against Liverpool this season. So I think if it came down to a showdown between those two, either in one of the knockout rounds or the final, I'd give Liverpool more than a puncher's chance, I think.
It's Manchester United this weekend for Arsenal. How difficult is this trip going to be for Manchester United to halt Arsenal? Or is Michael Carrick going to pull another rabbit out of the hat?
He might do. Just on that, I don't think, you just touched on it there, but to win the Premier League and Champions League, that's, it's hardly ever done. Of course it's been done. And for that reason, I think it's going to be very difficult, because I think it's all about the Premier League for Arsenal. And I do think they'll win that. And you look at what happened this time last season, PSG, no one talked about them, and they came through in the second half of the season. Bayern Munich, if Real Madrid get themselves together, and Barcelona as well. At the very end of this competition, you meet the best teams in Europe. And it's not an easy thing to do. So I personally don't think Arsenal will do it. I think they will win the Premier League and probably the Carabao Cup. But in terms of
You
United,
didn't include Benfica on that list, Scott.
I
It's
did
unlike
not
you.
include Benfica. They have not done well. Yeah, just the 2 wins so far. But do you know what? They may get into the playoffs. Let's wait and see.
Never know. Never know. Never know.
Um,
In terms
I,
of the weekend, what do you reckon?
yeah, I think off the back of not just the result but the performance, then again this is almost everyone is expecting Arsenal to win this, so Mickey's got nothing to lose. And if he does the similar tactics in terms of just really, I mean, Arsenal don't play with a high line and they've got much more pace than Manchester City, a much better defence, of course. Pressing wise, I think they're the best team in Europe. So if they can somehow beat the press and counter attack really well with the pace that they did at the weekend, then I wouldn't say they've got half a chance, but that's their best chance. But I do fancy Arsenal to be too strong here. What they did, the changes they made to go to Inter and win in the way they did, just shows at this moment in time, they're the best team in Europe. But we said the same about Liverpool last season.
And they've got a cracking depth, which nobody else really possesses. If they have a problem, it's in the striking position where they don't have an out-and-out 20, 30 goal a season striker, but those are rare. Gabriel Jesus scored a brace in midweek. Gyökeres did score from open play. Kai Havertz has become a world beater, even though he hasn't kicked a ball for 10 months. He's got better and better. And actually, to be fair, I'm one of those who keep saying when he's back, he will lead the line, because when you do watch him, and I watched him down at Portsmouth the other week, there's a difference about him. There's a level that he's up a level, and I don't care. I know sort of our producer was sort of joking about that, saying he's got better when he's not been playing, but the truth is, actually, he's a certain level above the other two. He's unbelievable. Like he sees the pass, the weight of the pass, the culture on the pass. He's just got a little bit more than everybody else. As for Manchester United, Crookie basically booked an open top bus parade when they lost 1-0 at home because the performance was so good. Would you take another valiant defeat this weekend?
No, because I think there's an opportunity there for Manchester United to go and do what not many teams have done at the Emirates this season, come away with a positive result. I think if they play with the same energy they did against Manchester City, then certainly I think they're capable of getting a draw. Would I snap your hands off for a point? Absolutely. I think that would be a tremendous result given how strong Arsenal have been at home. They've had a full week to recover. I know they made changes, but Arsenal have had to go away from home in the Champions League. But I will caveat that and say that United's record at the Emirates, barring that FA Cup success last season, is pretty dreadful, isn't it?
Yeah, and also I suppose we probably should add into this, Scott, that we saw Manchester City in midweek. We saw them at the weekend. I saw them the week before as well. And they are not at their best. And obviously they're suffering with injury too, especially in that back line. But Mark Gay should be back this weekend. We'll get onto them in just a second. They take on Wolverhampton Wanderers. But that therefore maybe Manchester United's performance against them last week shouldn't be overstated. There's still a very lot of work to do for Manchester United to get to a point where they're really competitive.
Yeah, and if you look at the performances of some of them, like even Dorgu, who I know is Crookie's favourite player, and he's got a poster of him over his bedroom wall. He was brilliant, wasn't he? I mean, that was certainly very good anyway. And it's easy, sort of first game, new manager, and Mickey with the history he's got with the club, playing at home against Man City. Now is, can you do it again? And the only positive, I'm trying to look for positives. The only positive again is that although Arsenal made a lot of changes in the game against Inter, they still had the travelling time and that. And, United, because they're not very good at the moment, don't have any midweek games. So, Mickey again would have had time to work on the training pitch. They would have slept well. They'd have eaten well. So, I'm looking for little possible reasons why they might get a draw out of it. But no, I still fancy Arsenal to be too strong because ultimately they're just that much better than United.
What are you scoffing and laughing about, Crook?
It was just Scott having a little pop there by saying because United are not very good, they haven't got any midweek games. Listen, what I'm almost certain of is they will turn up and perform because they always do in the big games. That's why that Manchester City game wasn't a complete surprise to me. I don't think this is where you really test Michael Carrick. I think the bigger tests are ahead because after Arsenal, you look at United's run of games, they are favourable. But these are the games that over the course of not just this season, but actually under numerous managers, they've struggled to get up for. Fulham at home, I think, is not too far away. Everton away, they've got West Ham again to play as well. That's when you'll find out just how much of a corner they've turned under Michael Carrick.
Interesting, because we've had, what is it now, 10 days? Not even that, actually, probably only 9 days of Michael Carrick. And Crook hasn't deviated from his course that he should just be the interim manager. How long before he flip-flops? If they beat Arsenal, the hysteria is going to go into overdrive, isn't it? Yeah, it'd be
Well, you'll
fascinating
have
to
to
see.
certainly bring me down off the press room ceiling if we do win at the Emirates.
It's going to be like when we went to Manchester City the other year, when we're in the press box at Manchester City and they scored 2 late goals to come from behind to win the derby. And it was like, I was like, like when you're physically restraining someone, sit down. You are in a press box. Calm yourself. He was up, like giving it like that. And I was like, no, sit down.
You know what?
Get
He was
thrown
like
out.
he was like that in the press room at Stamford Bridge as well when we were watching the game. And him and Leanne, it was almost like, kick these two out, will you please? For goodness sake.
Yeah. There's not a great deal of professionalism about the fella, is there? Let's be completely honest. Even though he's dressed up all refined today, trying to imitate a college professor or a maths genius, he actually is a bit rough and ready, really. And that's how we like him. That is for sure. Talking of rough and ready, Manchester City take on Wolverhampton Wanderers this weekend. Arsenal's closest title challengers, still Manchester City in most people's eyes. But do either of you give them a single chance after the week that they've had of closing that gap?
No, I think Danny Murphy hit the nail on the head on White and Jordan this week when he said even if Arsenal lose 3 games, which is unlikely, bearing in mind they've only lost 2 of their first 22, City are not going to be foot perfect, inch perfect for the rest of the season. They just haven't got that consistency. They've lost 5 times already. We had that stat, didn't we, about Liverpool early in the season, when if you lose more than 5 games, you don't really have a chance of winning the title. So, yeah, I think Arsenal are just going to methodically plot the course to the title. And do you know what? Actually, a point might be a decent enough result for Mikel Arteta. I do think Man City will beat Wolves, but it's not a given, is it? A, because of their recent form, and B, because Rob Edwards, for all the criticism he got for swapping Borough for Molineux, he has made Wolves harder to beat. He's got them playing with a little bit of pride that maybe wasn't there at the start of the season.
Scott?
Yeah, no real chance. I'm sticking with the team that I said at the start of the season. I think they do look, yeah, absolutely. Danny, Crookie, spot on. Even if Arsenal do drop those points, you can't see City of 3-4 years ago doing what they did. Again, going back to what work they are defensively, they're too open. You and I discussed it in the summer in that Juventus game. Do you remember in the Club World Cup, we went a little bit early, very next game, Al Hilal, and lost to that. For that reason, I'm like, no, do you know what? They're still a year away. Next season, I don't want to look too far ahead, I think is going to be a fantastic season. I think Liverpool will have overcome what they've had in the first half of this season and will be a lot better. I think City, in terms of rebuilding the empire, all these players are still very fresh, very new, and they'll go again in the summer as well. And then there's Arsenal and hopefully Chelsea. I think next season will be brilliant, but this season, it's all about Arsenal.
There's a social media headline. Minto writes off this season in January as boring mush. Next year will be much more exciting.
I did not say that, Samuel.
Mark Gay will probably make his debut. You don't pay that sort of money and rush him in the door in January unless you're going to start him. They're going to do that. He's going to be pivotal for Manchester City because of the injuries that they've got. He does allow them to read the game a little bit better, play maybe that high line. He has got pace, but it's more about the way he reads the game and it knows when to intervene, which is going to be important for them. The issue that Scott mentioned there, I think, is really important. It's the midfield issue. There's not enough pressure on the ball. When they lined up against Manchester United, I thought to myself, that looks a little bit open. Foden and Silva in the midfield behind Haaland, the 2 wide boys, and then Rodri sitting on his own. Rodri is a very, very good player and maybe back in the day could cover the ground of 2 people, but he certainly can't now after his very, very bad injury that he had. And he's certainly not up to speed. And I don't know if he'll ever get to the full tilt that he was at before, which I hope is not the case, but it is difficult, right? When you've had one of those big ACL injuries to get there, and you talk to players that have had it before, they had to alter their game slightly. I do think they're asking a little bit too much of him, really, sitting him on his own. Most clubs play with 2 in that area, not just the 1.
Yeah, and maybe they need to look at that, Manchester City, because as much as defensively they're all over the shop, I think the fact they've not got the protection in front of them is a real factor behind that. And you mentioned Phil Foden there. he had a sort of mini revival, didn't he? In November and early December, he scored 6 goals in 5 games. He hasn't scored now since December the 14th. He was taken off at half-time in the Manchester derby. He couldn't make any impact in the Arctic Circle in midweek either before he was replaced by Marmoush with 20 minutes to go. Are we thinking it's an absolute given that he's on the plane for England for the World Cup next summer? Or does he need to find a bit of form?
12
between
games
now and the
without a
end of the
goal, I
season?
think it is, as you mentioned. And I think he has slowed up a little bit, as City have slowed up. And he is a sort of confidence player, isn't he? I don't think it's a given that anybody, apart from maybe the first 10, are on the plane, really. I've got to be honest. I think there's so much work to do yet between now and the end of the season. There's such a long way to go before the end of the campaign. Injuries, form issues. Foden was only back in the squad during the autumn period, mainly because there was other injuries as well, and they wanted to have a look at him, and he had started quite well. So, no, I don't think it's a given that he'll be on the plane. What about you, Scott?
No, I agree. I can throw Cole Palmer in there as well. And if Cole Palmer is fit and firing, how he was the first sort of 18 months of his Chelsea career, for me, he starts for England. But at this moment in time, I don't know if he's on the plane.
Same with Eza.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't need to speak Cole Palmer now. We can speak him later. He just needs to try and get minutes on the pitch. But in terms of Phil Foden, it is slightly worrying. I totally agree with you. And I said that to Adrian after the game. I said, look, there's plenty of time between now and the end of the season to pick up form. And you don't know what's going to happen with injuries. But it is slightly worrying where he started the season really well. And you're thinking, right, you're going to really crack on. And he hasn't. And you're wanting him to step up in those games at Old Trafford, at Bodo Glimt, at others as well, and say, I'm going to grab the game by the scruff of the neck. I'm going to show that I'm in the form I was that made me the Premier League's best player a couple of seasons ago. And we're just not seeing it at the moment. So I don't know. I mean, Pep's obviously got to get inside his head and see where he's at. But at this moment in time, no guarantees that he's on the plane.
Okay, that's Manchester City against Wolves. That's it for the title race. Let's have a look at some of the other weekend's action, starting at Turf Moor, where Thomas Frank has had a very good week. And we haven't said that very often. Massive win and performance from Spurs in midweek. That sort of eases the pressure. Does it on Thomas Frank? Crook, what is the latest with that? Because everyone was saying he was going to get fired after Tuesday night because everyone anticipated that Borussia Dortmund would beat them.
Yeah, and it felt like a matter of when and not if Thomas Frank's tenure was ended. But I think it has brought him a stay of execution, albeit if they go to Burnley and they don't perform, they drop more points. I think certainly the pressure from the fans will only crank up again. And you have to take the Dortmund game in isolation. Yes, they started really well, but that early sending off, which I think the common consensus was harsh, didn't half help Tottenham. And there was still anxiety around the stadium when their performance levels dipped a bit in the second half. They've still got unhappy players in Matthias Tell and Randall Kolomoani who are trying to get out of the football club this month. So, I don't think we've heard the end of those reports about Thomas Frank's future.
I think we're a little bit concerned if we're Tottenham Hotspur fans, Scott Minto, that Romero and Van de Ven have 11 goals, which is more than the entire front line combined.
Yeah, but you do want goals to be shipped around if you're not scoring up front. And Dominic Solanke is back, and what a finish that was midweek. I'd like to see him try that again. But even the 11v11, I thought they were the better side. I thought it was a really poor Dortmund side, really disappointing. But from an individual point of view and collective point of view, I thought Spurs were excellent. And look, I like Thomas Frank, and I've seen the way he evolved that Brentford side. But, there are issues with that Spurs side this season that, yes, of course, he's had injuries. And, yes, there are mitigating circumstances. But both with the ball and without the ball, it doesn't look like they've been particularly well coached. So I do understand where the Spurs fans are coming from. The only thing is, after that, and if they do get past Eintracht Frankfurt, or if they do lose to Burnley, really, are they going to get rid of him before that Frankfurt game?
I was going to say this, right? You can't sack a manager that has got you into the top 4 of the Champions League. How can you do that? How can you decide that the season is so bad that you're going to sack a manager that's got you into potentially the knockout positions of the Champions League without having to go through a playoff round? When, let's be honest, they didn't really deserve to be in the Champions League. They finished 17th last season. Come on. I mean, let's get a little bit real here. I know I say that all of the Premier League teams should just go through because they've got so much financial power behind them. But, okay, they aren't very good. Do you know what? They're not very good to watch either. Performances are never 90-minute performances. They're only ever sporadic and in-game performances. But they've had a lot of players out. As Glenn Hoddle couldn't stop telling me on Tuesday night, 13 players out at the moment. You have to understand that is a big, big issue. I don't think it's perfect, but I don't think you're going to solve Tottenham's problems by sacking Thomas Frank. I'm just putting it out there.
No, I think you're right, and I'm a big Thomas Frank fan. I've defended him. I think the expectation levels among some of the Tottenham supporters are unrealistic, but I think he's got an issue with the dressing room. I think there are some players there who think they should be playing for Barcelona and Real Madrid. Again, maybe
Well,
they
go
need
on then.
reminding. Maybe they need reminding that they finished 17th last season. So I hope he turns it around. But this is not an easy fixture, is it? Burnley, defensively, much better organised than they were under Vincent Kompany. Obviously, you've got the Scott Parker factor. He could be a contender long term to replace Thomas Frank potentially. So on the back of such a high in midweek, and their Champions League form has been excellent, I think this is a potential banana skin for Tottenham.
Now, Crook, I know you have a penchant for hyperbole. However, in the context of the Premier League, this is about the easiest fixture you can have in that division. No? In terms of away fixtures, this is number one on the terms of I would like to go there and play. Maybe two if you count Wolves as well. This is a match that they should be winning. However, Scott, West Ham hadn't won in 10 before playing Spurs. Bournemouth hadn't won in 11 before playing Spurs. Burnley, winless in 13 before playing Spurs. They couldn't, could they?
They're meeting Dr. Spurs, aren't they? Burnley away is not an easy game, and I know that. No, honestly,
it's not. But in the context of the whole league, you're not going to get many easier trips. I know no trip is easy. I don't. We used to come out with the platitudes of the Premier League managers. There's no easy games, but it's the easiest one out of the lot, isn't it?
But no, I don't know. I mean, Burnley went to Liverpool and got a draw there, didn't they? I mean, they just make things. I think the word easy is not quite right. Should they win? Absolutely. But I think Burnley can make it quite ugly. I think Scotty Parker knows what he has to do. From 2 years ago when, Vincent Kompany thought he was still playing for Manchester City, or, he was at Man City. This is a really dogged, hard-working side where if they're not at it 100%, either physically or mentally, if this is after the Lord Mayor's show, then they're not going to win. It's as simple as that. So I do get what you mean. Burnley, I do believe, will be going down along with Wolves, and we'll have to see one other. But these are the games, absolutely, that will define sort of Thomas Frank and getting the fans back on side, because it's not just the Dortmund at home, and hopefully they will qualify for top 8, not just for the playoffs in the Champions League, but can't keep on being bottom half of the Premier League, and in a way that they look like they're not being coached particularly well. That's the thing. If they look really tight and they're losing games by odd moments, or it's a really exciting game, they look like going forward, and then you can blame the injuries. I do think they need to look a better coach side, but they did midweek, and it's important they follow up on that.
John Heitinger has come into the management staff over the last couple of weeks as well, just to add a little bit of experience, Premier League winning experience. He was the assistant manager last year at Liverpool, so that might be an interesting turn of events. And I know you think I'm being facetious, but if you are ranking the Premier League away trips, I'm not saying it's easy. I know that there's no easy games in the Premier League. It's the best league in the world. There's never an easy game. It can go any way. But the fact is that if you're making a list of the places that, you want to go to back up a big performance in Europe, if you've got to go away from home at the weekend after you've played against Borussia Dortmund and put 3 points on the board, okay, you might choose West Ham first because the London Stadium is such an apathetic place to go to at the moment. You might choose Wolves, although they've got a little bit stiffer over the course of the last few weeks. Then you'd probably choose Burnley, right? Okay, so look, I think if you're Tottenham, this is a game that you've got to go there and you've got to back it up with a performance. West Ham take on Sunderland 12:30 live on talkSPORT. They kick off the weekend at home to Sunderland. A win here puts them just 2 points behind Forest in 17th and gives them a bit of pressure. But the issue that they've got, Alex Crook, is that despite the fact that I think the players that came back from international duty really helped them last week, the players coming back from Sunderland are going to help them too.
Yeah, and Sunderland just keep rolling on and on, don't they? Every time you expect them to falter, they come back with a response. I think they'll relish going to London Stadium. As you've mentioned, it's not been a happy hunting ground for West Ham for, well, a number of months now. And yes, it was a morale-boosting victory over Tottenham, but I actually think it suited them playing away from home and using the toxicity that was being aimed towards Thomas Frank from the Tottenham fans to get that victory. I do think they've got a little bit better. You know, that QPR game in the FA Cup, which again was primed in many people's eyes for an upset, I think they navigated that pretty well. And you're right, the players coming back from AFCON have made a difference. I think Somerville, who's been linked with Tottenham this week, has played really well in the last couple of games. Obviously, you've got the Paquetá situation lingering, but I do think this will be a harder game for Sunderland than maybe it would have been 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Okay, Lucas Paquetá lingering at West Ham. What's going to happen there? We'll see what happens. Callum Wilson has come back from nowhere. Everyone thought he'd left the club. He was left out of the matchday squad when I went there the other week for a game on a Monday night. And then all of a sudden, he was back in again and scoring goals. But why would you leave him out? He scores goals. Keep him around. They need him. Let's see what happens there. Let's take a look at Sunday now. And do us a favour, can the last person to leave Selhurst Parks just switch off the lights? Wow, what a week for Crystal Palace. It's been a bit of a disaster, really. Mark Gay's gone. Glasner says he's leaving and he's trying his best to find a way to be gone quicker than the end of the season. And now star striker Jean-Philippe Mateta, or to give him his sort of colloquial dressing room name, JP, wants out. How does this one play out, Crook?
I don't know, because we're nearly at the end of the transfer window. It closes a week on Monday. Crystal Palace want 40 million. He wants a hefty pay rise from what he's earning at Selhurst Park. I know Aston Villa have shown some interest, but I'm not sure where they're going to get 40 million from in this window. There's talk of Juve and Milan as well. But again, are they going to pay such a hefty fee? So I think he's more likely to stay than go, certainly in this window, but probably come the summer, it will be a different story. And it's a problem for Palace, and one that I've been highlighting for a while. We knew that really Oliver Glasner wasn't going to extend. They've obviously sold Mark Gay. They sold Eze last summer. Mateta wants out. I think Adam Wharton will be sold in the summer, particularly if he gets on the plane for England and has a decent World Cup. There's talk also of Munoz when he gets back fit, maybe wanting a move away. So these are difficult weeks ahead for Crystal Palace and for the hierarchy. I think they need to settle very quickly on who they want their new manager to be in order to really have a plan going forward for how they replace these star players.
The vultures will be circling, won't they? Because if you're Ismaila Sarr or you're Adam Wharton, you'll be looking at everybody else exiting and thinking, I think I need to get on that train as well. And we know that Crystal Palace are quite happy to sell some of their crown jewels. I mean, if it wasn't nailed down, that roof at the Holmesdale Road end would probably be up for sale as well, wouldn't it, Scott?
Yeah. But I've said before that this is the greatest time to be a Crystal Palace fan. There's never been a better time with it, where they are in the Premier League and the fact they won the FA Cup. They're in Europe right now. And Glasner wants to take the club forward. Now, I'm pretty sure he's not asking for Champions League players. And he also understands that players will be sold. What he's asking for, and I had a conversation with David Moyes back in September, and he said for his summer window, he wanted to try.
It's okay.
But it's relevant. He wanted to try and bring in Europa League type players, and the Europa League type players weren't willing to come because Everton was still seen as like a relegation sort of scrapping side. So he needs like a mid-table, and then hopefully in next summer he'll be able to do that. Crystal Palace are there. They should be attracting those Europa League type players. And what is happening? What does Steve Parish? Is he always going to have this? Let's just stay in the Premier League, or is he at least going to try and nudge forward? I'm not saying the big leap, and Palace always have to be careful. But even listening to Simon Jordan, it looks like they've got PSR room to manoeuvre. They've got two billionaires who could stick their hand in their pocket. So if I were a Palace fan, and I'm not, let me say, I'd be really frustrated. This is a sliding doors moment where we have the chance to really be that sort of Brighton, where and they won't like being compared to Brighton, but going into chasing Europe on a yearly basis, or you lose your best manager, you lose 3 or 4 of your best players, you go back to just trying to survive.
Talking of PSR concerns, Newcastle take on Aston Villa this weekend. Home comforts once again for Newcastle midweek, 3-0 and very comfortable against PSV. But they did lose Bruno Guimaraes, and I don't think he's going to be back for the weekend, Crook.
I think that's a huge blow. I think he's been one of their most important players in what's been largely an inconsistent season. I agree with what you were saying earlier. I think Eddie Howe deserves far more credit than he's getting for what he's done there. He's put themselves in a brilliant position to qualify for the last 16 of the Champions League. They're still in with a fighting chance of getting to the League Cup final, albeit it looks very difficult to overturn that deficit against Manchester City. But if they score early at the Etihad in the second leg, then who knows? But Guimaraes has been a real driving force for them. And do you know what? There's a lot of discontent from Newcastle fans towards Anthony Gordon. I know he scored in midweek, but he was getting a pasting by some of the callers on the sports bar. The one they're really loving at the minute, and again, we've talked a lot about England's World Cup squad. Lewis Hall was brilliant, wasn't he, in midweek?
Oh, he was terrific.
That left-back spot does seem to be up for grabs, particularly with Livramento struggling again with injuries. So, yeah, I think if he can stay fully firing for the rest of the season, he's got a great chance. But this is the PSR derby, isn't it, between Villa and Newcastle? Two clubs who want to spend to smash through that glass ceiling, but aren't able to.
Yes, that's how we introduced it, Crook, when you were texting.
No, I heard that.
Oh, right. Okay, just check. Yeah. Talking of great English left backs, Scott Minto, Lewis Hall, wax lyrical about him because he is superb.
Do you know what? I couldn't agree more with Crookie. And I feel like I need to have a shower now that I've agreed with him so much. I saw him. Was it the City game? I'm just trying to think what game it was where I thought he was sensational, despite the fact that they lost, obviously, in that particular match. I see him now looking like, because don't forget he started off as a midfielder at Chelsea and then went to sort of like left back. It took him a bit of time to get used to sort of being a first team player at Newcastle. He, to me, at this moment in time, especially with Livramento and his injury problems, is my starter. I mean, Nico O'Reilly has done really well in that position, and I think it's between those two. I really like Miles Lewis-Skelly, but he's just not getting enough minutes. I look at Lewis Hall, and he seems to have the lot. He's a good defender. He's getting better one-on-one. He understands when to tuck round, when he needs to try and push on. And going forward and on the ball, I don't think there are many better left backs out there. Again, I'd put O'Reilly in with that shout. So I think he could be that number one for England.
And also, Scott, he can deal with the ball better than most. He can receive it in tight areas. He's almost press resistant in effect. Sometimes he gives the ball to others in a manner in which, well, he could deal with it, but they might not be able to. But he is that talented that he can take it at any circumstance. Just give him the ball in any way and he'll deal with it. And then he's very good at running with it and opening up space for the team. I think he's an excellent fullback. And, it's another really good player that came through the Chelsea Academy that's playing for somebody else. What about Aston Villa? Their manager, Unai Emery, clearly not happy last week, saying that they're contenders only for 5th, while the board still scratching their head over whether or not they're going to bring in replacements. They haven't done that deal for Tammy Abraham yet, but they've allowed Daniel Marlon to leave. And that's, I think, will cause a bit of consternation because they need to replace him.
Yeah, they do. It was a weird one to let him go out the building before they had that replacement definitely ready to go. I think the complication with Tammy Abraham, from what I understand it from sources in Turkey, is that Besiktas are claiming he's already done enough to turn that loan into an obligation. So they're basically claiming, look, he's not a Roma player anymore. He's a Besiktas player, so you have to negotiate with us. So it all seems rather messy. That's why they're showing interest in Mateta as a potential alternative option. They've spoken to Milan about Ruben Loftus-Cheek because your mate Boubacar Kamara, I know you're a big fan, is out for the rest of the season. So I do think Villa are going to get busy between now and the end of the transfer window. But I'd have kept Marlon in the building until such time as they had those signings ready to play, because this is a big period, isn't it? We were recording this before they play in Turkey in the Europa League. And obviously it's a quick turnaround to this game against Newcastle. And we know how strong Newcastle are at home.
Indeed. Scotty, thank you very much. Appreciate your time this morning. We've got live commentary from West Ham versus Sunderland on Saturday. Portsmouth, Southampton. Scott's doing that the weekend. What a game that is, by the way, Scotty. You're so lucky going to Fratton Park on Sunday. That'd be an absolute belter. And Monday night football comes from the Hill Dickinson Stadium as Everton take on Leeds. I'll be there for that one. Crookmeister, go and finish marking your papers. We'll see you over the weekend. Scotty, make sure you bring your gold lame trunks tomorrow for our special day out. And we will see you on Monday to review all the weekend's Premier League action.